Hi guys, it's Frankie from Frankie Tech. Good to see you guys again. And I'm here today with a continuation of my previous video, the Redmi 7 versus the Redmi Note 7 versus the Redmi Note 7 Pro. And today we're going to go more deep dive here in the kind of specific areas that I want to cover with these phones. Now, as you know, I kind of started this comparison in my previous video. Thanks again for, your patience. It's been a crazy week, but I'm glad to be back here producing this content for you guys. And what I want to do today is just go down the laundry list of design, display, talking about performance. We'll do some quick gaming, then I have some great camera samples I want to share with you guys here, and just really kind of answer the question, which of Xiaomi's new Redmi offerings is best for you? Because I really do think each of these phones provides an awesome value at its specific price point. Now, talking about price points, I got the Redmi 7 for just over 1,100 Hong Kong dollars, so in that kind of 140 US dollar price range. The Redmi 7, this is the 6GB version here, and it is a little bit more expensive than the entry level. Got it for around 1,800 Hong Kong dollars. And then we have the Redmi Note 7 Pro. This is the 6GB 128, and this is the one that I got for just over 2,200 Hong Kong dollars. So getting closer to that $300 price point. But as you see, all these phones offer pretty awesome value at their respective price points, and I just want to kind of answer that question, which is the best for you. So let's go ahead and have a look. So talking about design, and just quickly going over this section, I did cover this in the previous video. Basic specs here, in terms of weight, we have 180 grams on the Redmi 7 versus 186 on the Note 7 and the Note 7 Pro, whereas the Redmi 7 is a little bit thicker here at 8.5 millimeters, while the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro are a little bit thinner at 8.1. And I'll use the Redmi Note 7 here because you pretty much have the same design between these two. But just sharing to you once again the sides of the phones. There you see the volume rocker, power button. There are the bottoms. And I did mention this in the previous video as well. You notice the curve here on the Redmi 7 versus the flat edge on the Redmi Note 7. That is a design choice here, I think, just to kind of deal with the fact that this phone is a little bit thicker. It does remind me a little bit of the Xiaomi Mi 9's design, which I've said honestly I don't like as much as the Mi 9 SEs or the Redmi Note 7s. I prefer this kind of flat edge versus the kind of the curved edge right here. SIM tray in the same spot, and pretty much identical in terms of the IR blaster, microphone, and 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And it even goes down to the camera placement. They are practically identical as well, but the sensor is clearly very different here on these phones. And there you see all three phones next to each other on the backs. Which is my favorite color still? I'm gonna have to go still with that Twilight Gold, although I'm really starting to lean towards the Neptune Blue for my own personal use. But this Lunar Red is, like I mentioned, a very unique color, and it is something that at this price point is going to be appreciated. But what won't be appreciated, and I know some of you hate this, is plastic. And you know how I feel about plastic. I'm not a huge fan. At this price point, I can't really blame the Redmi 7 for having plastic. And clearly, the Redmi Note 7 and the Note 7 Pro are just far more premium with their Gorilla Glass 5 backs here. They just feel better in the hand. And just overall, that is a step above between these two and this one right here. So if you're looking at overall design and kind of what you're getting out of it, either the Redmi Note 7 or Note 7 Pro are going to just give you a more premium experience. The plastic on the edges is also kind of a more hard and glossy plastic, whereas the one on the Redmi 7 is actually just this standard, very kind of cheap looking plastic, that matte kind of feel to it. Doesn't look as good as the ones on the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro. So this is clearly a case of two design ethics here and two different styles. Which is my favorite between these two? I'm going to have to go with the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro. Specifically, I would say in this Twilight Gold is still amazing, but really it doesn't matter which color you use. I think just design-wise, you're going to get a little bit more for your money with these phones. But don't get me wrong, the Redmi 7 in this Lunar Red is still a very nice color and just kind of nice look to have. And even though it does feel a little bit cheaper in the hand, you can't deny that they've done something really special here at this almost $100 US price point. So talking about display, and this is another section where there's a little bit of separation here between the Redmi Note and Note 7 and Note 7 Pro and the Redmi 7. So in terms of size, there is a specific difference here, but it's very slight. 6.3-inch displays on these two versus 6.26 on the Redmi 7. And the other major difference here is that both of these phones have full HD displays. They're all IPS LCDs, but these come in at 1080p, whereas the Redmi 7s is 720p. So for any of you guys who pretty much said, I promised myself I'll never use a 720p phone again, that's pretty much ixnay here on the Redmi 7. You will not be getting this phone. But I think it's still, and I'll tell you this honestly, when I bought this phone, I took it out of the box, I did the Street Tech unboxing, I didn't notice that the screen was that much worse. And in fact, afterwards, once I started looking at it, I was like, oh, wait a second. This is actually not as kind of pixel dense as the other Redmi Note 7s. And it was something that you didn't really notice unless you go looking for it. If you go looking for it, you'll find it. And it's a very clear difference once you see it. The other slight difference you might see here as well is that the Redmi 7 has a slightly different aspect ratio at 19:9 versus 19.5:9 on the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro. These are a little bit taller displays, and it is very, very apparent there that this one is a little bit wider. And looking at the white points, you can see they are very, very much the same. I think these two are very similar, but I want to just double check here in display that we're all in the same spot when it comes to contrast and colors. So there you see the settings on all three phones. They're practically the same, and I've chosen increased contrast on each one. I think the white point on the Redmi Note 7 at the kind of the base point is actually a little bit cooler, whereas I kind of appreciate the white point on the Note 7 Pro and the Redmi 7 a little bit more. I'm more into those kind of warmer colors. When you use AMOLED phones like the Samsung S10 Plus or the iPhone XS Max, your white point is going to be much closer to this than to this. And here you see, cycling through the photos, we have the Redmi 7 at the top, the Note 7, and then the Note 7 Pro at the bottom. And the colors on all of them are pretty good. I think the colors definitely pop a little bit more on the Redmi Note 7 here, but they're all using pretty standard IPS LCD panels, which means you'll get that kind of more kind of grayish black in the blacks. They won't be as deep, but I think overall, none of these phones are going to do a bad job reproducing colors. Although I do give the slight edge just from my own visual tests here to the Redmi Note 7 Pro and the Redmi Note 7. These are practically the identical panel, whereas I feel the Redmi 7's panel is a little bit more muted, just slightly, but it's not something that's going to be a deal breaker, like I said, once again. And there you have it, YouTube playback on all these three Redmi 7 phones. And I think the viewing experience here is going to be solid whichever phone you pick. There's a slightly increased bezel here on the Redmi 7, while the bezels on the Note 7 and the Note 7 Pro are practically identical. These two phones are going to offer such a similar experience that I think if you're choosing between those in terms of display quality, just don't bother. But the real question here, are you getting a similar experience on the Redmi 7 as on the other two phones? And I would say resoundingly, yes, you are. Now, don't hate on me because I know what you're thinking already. It's not full HD. How can you say it's the same experience? Look, I think that 720p, even at this size, is still pretty decent. And we're talking about a 269 pixel per inch versus 400 plus on these phones. If that is going to be a major factor for you, then you're not even looking at this phone. I'm talking about all you guys out there who want to get the entry-level Redmi 7. Don't worry about it. Look at the quality of this shot and look at the viewing angles. This panel does a great job at this price point, and so I would not worry about it. And I would say that all three Redmi 7 phones, offer really great YouTube viewing experience. But once again, DRM Info, it's going to be a triple wow. Because all of these phones are not going to be able to provide that L1 HD Netflix experience. And that is unfortunate. I mean, I really wish one of these phones had, the Redmi 7 is the global version right here, whereas the other two are the China versions. I think that if you're in India, you are getting the Redmi Note 7 Pro with L1, and I'll just hit me up in the comments if that's the case, because if you are getting that, then congratulations, good for you, that's awesome. I know the Mi 9 global version also has L1, but across the board here, it is unfortunate. L3 only. And now, so you may have been wondering, Frankie, why are you doing this comparison? These phones are all so similar. Why are you doing it? This is really why I'm doing it. Talking about performance, this is where we see the major separation between the Redmi 7 phones right here. And we're going across a real kind of expanse of performance from the Snapdragon 632 on the Redmi 7 to then the Snapdragon 660 on the Redmi Note 7 and the Snapdragon 675, brand new 675 on the Redmi Note 7 Pro. And the gulf couldn't be any clearer here with a 1244 single core score versus a 2367 single on the Redmi Note 7 Pro, and just clear difference in numbers here between the three. Now, in terms of daily use, you're going to ask, like, how does that translate? I will say I probably use of these three phones the Redmi Note 7 the most. And the Snapdragon 660, while it's been a reliable chip, it's gone a little bit slower, I think, in recent use. Any phones coming out probably in the second half of this year with a 660, you're probably going to start wondering, why aren't they using the 675? Now, don't get me wrong, the Redmi 7 is at a different price point than these two, so you could almost say there's a little bit of a separation there. And this still offers pretty good day-to-day experience. I've been using this phone here, and this is the global version, and apps open up pretty quickly overall. You see there. So since we have all these phones here, let's go ahead and do just a quick speed test and see which ones open them the fastest. So I'm going to get in position here. So let's try a few apps here. Let's start with the weather app in 3, 2, 1. All pretty similar there. Pretty lightweight app overall. Let's go something a little bit heavier now. We'll go into the Play Store. Got the Play Store on all three in 3, 2, 1. And you saw it there, Redmi Note 7 Pro definitely opened that much faster than the other two. And very interesting result here. The Redmi 7 actually got the graphics here faster than the Redmi Note 7. Internet's not as fast in this room, so that may be the reason, but that was a non-issue for the Redmi Note 7 Pro. And while we're in here, let's do a little bit of just scrolling. And so you see, it is definitely a slower experience on this phone. Now the Redmi Note 7. What a difference the 660 makes. Much smoother here. But still a few stutters here and there. And wrapping up with the Redmi Note 7 Pro. Butter smooth. And I think that pretty much sums it up there. What is your experience going to be like on these phones? The Redmi 7 is going to give you an adequate experience. It's not going to be anything just overwhelmingly speedy or zippy. But if you don't really care about that and price point is your only care, then I think you'll be fine with that. The Redmi Note 7 offers good experience. I would say it's not super fast, but it's good enough. And at this price point, I don't think you're complaining. But if you can get your hands on the Redmi Note 7 Pro, and I know that availability is a major factor for you guys. This phone is now officially only going to be available in India and China. That is all. And it's really, I think, unfortunate that Xiaomi is not launching this in more parts of the world. I do think that this phone undercuts a lot of what they're hoping to do with kind of upcoming releases like the Mi A3, like other global releases that are going to be using the Snapdragon 675 chip. So that may be why they're kind of holding off releasing this, and will be releasing phones with that chip in other markets soon. But if you can get your hands on this Redmi Note 7 Pro, the performance and experience is solid, and it is just a speedy phone. Everything opens up. There are no stutters to speak of using this phone whatsoever. And quick word on battery life here. Comparing the specs, there's nothing to compare. 4,000 milliamperes across the board here on all of these phones. And I have extensively tested the battery life on the Redmi Note 7, which achieved well over 8 hours of screen on time in my battery drain test. Go have a look at that video if you wanted to see that. I haven't fully tested, though, the Redmi 7 or Redmi Note 7 Pro, in terms of battery. So if you wanted to see some video like that in the future, do let me know. I have these three phones to test together, so that may be a very interesting test to do. All right, and now we are going to go into some Asphalt 9 gaming here on these three awesome Redmi phones. And just talking quickly about the GPUs, we have the Adreno 506 on the Redmi 7, the 512 on the Note 7, and the 612 on the Note 7 Pro. So clearly a separation there in terms of generation between the Note 7 Pro and these other phones. Let's go ahead and press play on these phones and get started with gaming. And so here we go into a quick race, and I'm going to try to play a little bit on each of the three phones. Let's start with the Redmi 7. And here we go on the Redmi 7. Now, I've played on the other phones quite a bit, but this is the first time I'm doing Asphalt 9 with the Snapdragon 632. While it feels good, it feels a tad sluggish, I'm not going to lie. Definitely not getting that kind of really smooth vibe from it. But hey, it can play it, and it can play it pretty well, it seems. So this is not going to be a major deal breaker. All you want is an entry-level phone that can play this, then that's a non-issue. Now we're on the Redmi Note 7, and I have no doubts that this phone is going to play this beautifully. And the Redmi Note 7 Pro, though, it is the leader here in terms of performance. First place, baby. But don't get me wrong, all of these phones actually perform this pretty well. The one thing I will say is that the smoothest experience was very much on the Redmi Note 7 Pro. The Redmi Note 7 comes in second. I think it still plays this game beautifully, but you just feel this level of polish and smoothness that comes with the new Adreno 612 here, whereas the Redmi 7 gives you a serviceable gaming experience here on Asphalt 9, and I don't think it's going to be like a great experience, but hey, at least you can play the game. And now the audio speaker test, and I'm going to bring the mic down and let's see which of these three phones offers the best audio experience. And what can I say? I think there's quite a distinction here between the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro and the Redmi 7. I think the loudness, the quality of the speakers is just clearly better on these two phones. Whereas the Redmi 7, while it's not a bad speaker, it definitely just has a little bit of lacking sound to it. It's just not as bright. I feel the sounds, once you get up to that 100%, are just kind of indicative of a lower quality speaker. Now, I don't think it's that much worse just from my ear than these, but if you really want the best speaker listening experience on your phone, then you'll want to pick up one of these two instead. And now wrapping up with camera here, and this is a clear, also distinct gulf, I'd say, between the Redmi Note 7 and Note 7 Pro and the Redmi 7. 12 megapixel, 2 megapixel dual camera system here. It does have the AI camera, but as you see there, f2.2 So that is not going to be doing great work versus the cameras on the Redmi Note 7 or the Redmi Note 7 Pro, because both of these, as you know, have the that main 48 megapixel sensor in them, and it is an f1.8 aperture on both the Redmi Note 7 and the Note 7 Pro. But the major difference here, obviously, is the camera sensor. So using the Samsung sensor here that I think initially seemed pretty good, but I think a lot of you guys didn't appreciate the fact that it wasn't that Sony IMX586, which is now found here in the Redmi Note 7 Pro. And so I have recorded a bunch of sample photos between not just these two, but between all these three here. Have a look at these results and hit me up in the comments which phone you think does the best. So that's it for this video and my final verdict here on the Redmi 7 phones. Now Xiaomi's been working really hard here, and with their new sub-brand they've created some pretty amazing offerings here with these three phones. I love the fact that really at any of these price points, each of these phones is going to offer something of value to you. But I think the real question comes out now, I guess it's almost like a two-part question. Which is the best phone of these three? And then which is the best phone for you, specifically for your needs? And I think it's very obvious to know which is the best of these three phones. It's clear to be the Redmi Note 7 Pro. Between the Snapdragon 675 processor, all the bells and whistles that the Redmi Note 7 brought, but with that improved Sony IMX586 camera, this is clearly the #1 option if you can get it. And meanwhile, we have the Redmi Note 7, which is more widely available now. It's in many more countries, but is using the Snapdragon 660 processor, which is a little bit starting to show its age a bit, but still has a great 48 megapixel shooter with that Samsung sensor. And I've done extensive coverage of this phone. I think it is a great option. And then finally, you have the Redmi 7, which is offering a lot of bang for the buck for that close to $150 US price range. Now, is it offering some compromises here that may be deal breakers for you, like the 720p screen, slightly reduced audio quality, and a camera which is just really average, if not just lackluster compared to these two? Yes, those are all compromises you're going to have to make if you reach that price point. But I have three specific users, I think, that will cater to these three specific phones. And so the first one is, the value shopper. If you only value price alone, you will get, I'd say, about 90% of the experience of these two phones in the Redmi 7. Now, you may say, oh, but like that 720p screen, the slightly thicker phone, all that stuff, the slightly worse build, that's all okay for me. Like, I'm not going to rail on this phone because it is slightly lower quality. It's coming in at a price point that is significantly lower, 699 yuan for the 3GB 32GB version. If you can get that version of the phone in your country eventually, that is going to be the one to pick. So for a value shopper, Redmi 7 is your top choice. But now talking about your price to performance ratio kind of person, the person who wants the best price to performance ratio on their phone, or they're the serious gamer, they want to get the most juice out of their phone, but at the best price. If you can get the Redmi Note 7 Pro, I think that Snapdragon 675 processor on it is going to last. It's going to be on phones even into next year. And getting this now, you're getting probably one of the top mid-range chips on the market, which is performing almost to the level of the Snapdragon 845 from last year. Now, not in all ways, but I think it is just doing really good work here. And so if you are the person who wants the most performance for the lowest price and you can get a good deal on this phone, go for it. But last but not least, we have person or shopper number 3 here, and that is the just all-around phone user. Who is the person, who just wants the best all-around experience, but wants to pay a very good price and just wants a best all-around experience? I hands down will say that the Redmi Note 7 is still your best pick. You don't have to worry about availability issues that come with the Redmi Note 7 Pro. You don't have to worry about the increased pricing, having to get it from other retailers, dealing with that, and you don't have to worry about the limitations that are created by getting the Redmi 7. This phone with the Snapdragon 660, with the same panel as the Pro, with great speakers, great camera, and just overall awesome battery life as well, in terms of availability and in terms of just overall package. For your just general user, the top phone that I would recommend of these 3. But hit me up in the comments, which of these 3 phones is your pick? And if you like this video, give me that thumbs up. And if you love the content of Frankie Tech, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for future updates. Getting back into it, guys, so stay tuned for more great content coming next week. I'll have a little bit more time, a little bit more breathing room to do some good stuff. But hope you enjoyed this comparison here. And this is where I leave you by saying, this is Frankie Tech signing off. Y'all have a good one.